She hurled the toolbox across the garage. $40,000 of precision instruments exploded across the concrete wrenches, micrometers, torque gauges skidding under the wheels of a $40 million race car, while 40 engineers stood frozen, not breathing. "Get out!" Evelyn Vance's voice cracked down the middle. "You don't touch what you don't understand." Ethan Carter didn't flinch, didn't raise his voice, didn't raise his hands. He just looked at her, this 31-year-old CEO in a $2,000 suit, shaking with a rage she didn't understand herself. And then he knelt down on the cold concrete in his gray janitor's coveralls and began picking up his tools one by one, wiping each one clean on his sleeve. And not one person in that building knew the truth. That the janitor on his knees in front of them had designed the engine screaming inside her championship car. Every valve, every line, the whole beating heart of the machine that made her rich. And that the flaw he'd found the night before, the one she'd just fired him for touching, was going to kill her driver in 6 days. 90 minutes earlier, none of it had happened yet. Ethan pushed his cart down the main corridor of Vortex Motorsport at 5:45 in the morning, and the building was already screaming. He heard it before he saw it. Voices bouncing off 200,000 square feet of glass and steel, a rising panicked tide coming from Bay 3. He slowed his cart. He shouldn't have. 3 years he'd survived in that building by keeping his head down and his mouth shut, and the first rule of survival was simple. Whatever's happening in Bay 3 is not your problem. He kept walking anyway. Walt caught his sleeve near the water fountain. 68 years old, night security, the only man in the place who ever looked Ethan in the eye. "Don't go down there," Walt said quietly. "What's going on?" "They found your tag." Ethan's stomach dropped straight through the floor. "Already?" Vance came in at 5. Marcus was waiting for her at the door. Walt's jaw tightened. "Whatever you did to that car last night, son, they know somebody did it. They just don't know it's you." He glanced down the corridor. "Go home. Call in sick. I'll swipe you out." For one clean second, Ethan thought about it. He thought about his daughter's face. He thought about the rent. He thought about how easy it would be to just disappear again. He was good at disappearing. Then he thought about the driver. "They fixed the other seals yet?" Ethan asked. "What other seals?" "That's what I thought." He set the brake on his cart. "I gotta go down there, Walt." "Ethan, there's 4 more just like it. If nobody checks them, that car doesn't come home." He handed Walt his cart. "Watch this for me." And he walked toward the screaming. Bay 3 was a war room. 5 engineers hunched over laptops like men waiting to be shot. Marcus Webb, head of engineering, silver hair, silk tie, 50 years old and never held a wrench in his life, pacing in front of the open engine bay like a lawyer working a jury. And in the center of it, holding a small white maintenance tag between 2 fingers, like it was a live grenade, stood Evelyn Vance. "I'll ask one more time," she said. Quiet, controlled, worse than shouting. "This car, the one 5 of you told me could not be fixed, was opened last night. By someone with no authorization. Who signed it? M. Mech." She lifted the tag. "Who is Monsieur Mech?" Nobody answered. "Priya." She rounded on the young engineer with the tired eyes. "You were lead on this. Who touched my car?" "I don't know, Miss Vance." Priya swallowed. "But whoever it was—" She hesitated, and then the truth came out of her anyway, because she was an engineer before she was a coward. Whoever it was, they were right. The seal they replaced was the failure. "I checked it at 4 this morning. Number 3 injector. It's perfect. They found in one night what we couldn't find in a week." "That is not the point," Webb said smoothly. "With respect, Marcus, that's the entire point. The point," Webb said louder, "is that an unauthorized person worked alone overnight on a race-critical vehicle. Today it happened to work out. Tomorrow he guesses wrong and we bury a driver, and it's your name on the wrongful death suit, Evelyn. Your father's company, your legacy, gone." Ethan watched Evelyn's face, watched the words land exactly where Webb aimed them. Your father. Your legacy. 2 years she'd been fighting the whisper that she couldn't fill the old man's shoes, and Webb knew right where to press. That's when Ethan stepped into the doorway. "It was me," he said. 40 heads turned. For a moment nobody understood. They saw gray coveralls. They saw a mop cart in the hall. They saw a nobody, a man whose name none of them had ever bothered to learn, and their brains simply refused to connect that man to the words that had just come out of him. Evelyn Vance looked at him the way you'd look at a chair that suddenly spoke. "Excuse me. The tag's mine." Ethan nodded at her hand. "I'm M. Mech, maintenance mechanic. I found the seal failure last night and I replaced it." The silence stretched. "You," Evelyn said slowly, "fix the drains." "Yes, ma'am." "The lifts, the air conditioning, the toilets." "Yes, ma'am." "And you decided on your own in the middle of the night to open the most important vehicle this company has ever built and start pulling it apart." Her voice began to climb. "Do you have any idea what could have happened?" "He'd have died," Ethan said quietly. Everything stopped. "What did you say?" "Your driver, Marco." Ethan held her eyes. He hadn't meant to say it. He'd meant to stay small, stay quiet, drop the warning, and vanish. But the words were coming now, and he couldn't stop them because there was a limit even to a quiet man. The number 3 injector seal was weeping fuel above 214 degrees. That's why you got the power drop with no error code. It only opened when the block was hot, and it sealed back up the second the engine cooled. That's why your sensors never caught it. That's why 5 engineers stared at it for a week and saw nothing. It's not electronic, it's thermal, it's mechanical. You can't find it on a screen. You find it with your hands. You could have heard a bolt drop. Priya's mouth had come open. One of the younger engineers had gone very still. And Marcus Webb. Ethan saw it would remember it. Marcus Webb's face had drained of every drop of color. Because a janitor does not know the word thermal. A janitor does not know a block runs at 214. A janitor does not stand in a doorway and explain in one breath the exact failure mode that stumped a department of engineers. Only one man in that room understood what he was looking at, and that man had spent 3 years praying he'd never have to look at it. But Evelyn Vance didn't hear an engineer. She heard something far more dangerous to a woman who'd been underestimated her whole career. She heard a janitor telling her he was smarter than her. "Get him a chair," she said coldly. "No, don't. You know what I hear." She stepped toward Ethan. "I hear a man who read a Wikipedia article and thinks he's a genius. I hear a man who got lucky with a wrench and now wants to lecture me in my own building. You want to know how I know you got lucky?" She jabbed a finger toward the car. "Because trained engineers, educated men couldn't find it. And you're telling me a maintenance mechanic did it with a flashlight?" "Yes," Ethan said. "That's exactly what I'm telling you." Someone in the back of the room actually gasped. "Miss Vance!" Webb moved in fast now, sensing the moment, needing to close it before this stopped being about authority and started being about the car. "This is the reckless behavior I've been warning you about since the day you took over. You cannot let a man like this set a precedent. If it gets out that some janitor overruled your entire engineering staff, the sponsors, the press, the board, you'll never survive it. You have to end it, now, in front of everyone." Ethan looked at Webb then. Really looked at him. And Webb looked back, and for half a second the mask slipped, and Ethan saw the thing underneath. The fear, the calculation, the desperate need to get this man out of this building before he said one more word. "He knows," Ethan realized. "He's known the whole time who I am. He's the one who—" "You're terminated," Evelyn said. Ethan turned back to her. "Ma'am?" "Effective immediately. Security will walk you out. Leave your badge on the bench. Miss Vance." Priya stepped forward, her voice shaking. "Please. He saved the car. He might have saved Marco's life. You can't just—" "Effective immediately," Evelyn repeated, and she didn't take her eyes off Ethan. "Am I unclear?" Priya went silent. Ethan stood there a moment. Then he nodded, slow, tired, the nod of a man who had learned long ago that there was no arguing with someone who'd already decided who you were. He reached up and unclipped his badge. Number 4471. 3 years of his life. He set it gently on the workbench. And then, because he was human, because a driver's life outweighed his pride, he said one last thing. There are 4 more. Excuse me. 4 more seals, same batch, same failure. He pointed at the engine without touching it. Number 1, number 4, both banks on the passenger side. Full temperature cycles, they'll go the exact same way number 3 did. Maybe on the track. Maybe at 200 miles an hour. He looked at Priya, not at Evelyn. Check them before the race. Please, I'm not asking for me. He picked up his toolbox. And that's when Evelyn Vance, humiliated, furious 29 seconds from the single worst mistake of her life, grabbed the toolbox out of his hands and threw it across the garage. $40,000 of instruments exploded across the concrete. Get out, she screamed. You don't touch what you don't understand. The bay went dead silent. Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Not angry. Something worse than angry. Something that looked terribly like pity. Then he knelt down on the concrete in front of the entire engineering department, and he began picking up his tools one by one. He wiped each one clean on his sleeve. He set each one back in its foam cradle where it belonged. He was in no hurry. These tools had built things she couldn't dream of, and he would not leave a single one behind. Nobody moved to help him. Nobody dared. Only Marcus Webb turned away, turned his back on the whole scene, and pretended to study a monitor because Marcus Webb could not stand to watch it. Ethan closed the lid. He stood. He walked out of Bay 3 down the corridor past Walt, who couldn't meet his eyes, and out through the service door into the gray November cold, where his old truck was waiting. He got in. He set the toolbox on the passenger seat, buckled it in like it was a person. His hands were steady. His face was calm. And then alone, where no one on earth could see him. Ethan Carter pressed his forehead against the steering wheel and let out one long shaking breath, not for the job, not for the money, not even for his pride. For his daughter. Because now he had to go home and figure out how to tell a 7-year-old girl that Daddy needed to find a new place to work. The apartment was on the wrong side of Charlotte, up 2 flights of stairs that smelled like other people's dinners. Ethan sat in the truck in the parking lot for 10 minutes, putting his face back together before he went up. Lily wouldn't be home from school for hours. Miss Alvarez, the widow next door who watched her most afternoons, was hanging laundry off the balcony rail when he came up the stairs, and she took one look at him and knew. "They let you go," she said. Not a question. "How'd you guess?" "Because it's 11 in the morning and you're home and you've got that look your father used to get." She clipped a shirt to the line. Ethan had never told her about his father. She just said things like that the way some old women do. "Sit down. I'll make coffee." "I'm all right, Anna. Sit down." She pointed at the plastic chair on the balcony. "You'll tell the girl tonight. Between now and then you'll drink coffee, and you'll figure out what you're gonna say. You don't figure it out while she's looking at you. You figure it out now." So he sat, and he drank her coffee. And he tried to figure out what he was going to say. The problem was that he couldn't just tell Lily the truth, because the truth wasn't, "I got fired." The truth was a much bigger thing, a thing he'd been carrying for 3 years. A thing that started long before he ever put on a pair of gray coveralls. Because Ethan Carter had not always been a janitor. 6 years ago, his name had been on the wall at Vortex Motorsport, not stitched on a coverall mounted in the lobby on the founder's plaque right below the name of the old man himself, Evelyn's father. Ethan Carter, chief design engineer. He'd built the platform. He'd designed the engine architecture that every Vortex car still ran on to this day, the geometry, the cooling, the revolutionary layout that turned a struggling regional outfit into one of the most feared names in American racing. He'd been 30 years old and on top of the world. He'd had a wife named Sarah, a laugh like a bell, a garden on the balcony of a house that didn't smell like other people's dinners. He'd had a baby girl and a career that was supposed to change the sport forever. And then Sarah got sick. Fast. The kind of fast the doctors apologize for. 8 months from the diagnosis to the last night in the hospital, and through all of it, Ethan had kept working because Vortex needed the platform finished, and the old man was counting on him, and there was always a reason to stay one more hour. He told himself he was providing. He told himself he'd make it up to her. He was in a design review meeting when she died. Marcus Webb had insisted the review couldn't be moved. Ethan didn't make it to the hospital in time. He walked out of Vortex that night and he didn't come back. He couldn't. Every drawing on his desk, every line he'd drafted, every piece of that machine was soaked through with the memory of the 8 months he'd chosen work over the only woman he'd ever loved. He couldn't look at any of it. He gave notice by phone. He sold the house. He took his daughter and he vanished into the ordinary world, and he became a man who fixed drains, because a man who fixes drains gets to go home at 5 o'clock every single day and never ever misses a bedtime. That was the deal he'd made with himself. Never be great again. Never build anything again. Just be there. And it had worked. For 3 years, it had worked. Until 9 months ago, when he'd been out of racing so long, he thought the wound had finally closed, and he'd picked up an industry trade magazine in a doctor's waiting room, and he'd seen a photo of the new Vortex Apex, and something had caught his eye. The cooling geometry was wrong. Not wrong like a mistake. Wrong like changed. Somebody had modified his platform's stripped weight out of the thermal management system to chase lap times, and in doing so, had introduced a stress point exactly where he'd spent 6 months of his life making sure there wasn't one. It was subtle. It was the kind of thing you'd only see if you'd designed the original. And it was the kind of thing that would eventually, under the right heat and the right load, start failing seals. He'd sat in that waiting room with the magazine shaking in his hands, and he'd done the math, and the math said, someone is going to die in that car. He could have called. He could have written a letter. He'd tried, in fact, a long, careful email to Vortex Engineering detailing the flaw signed with his own name. It bounced back. Address not recognized. He'd tried again through the general line. No response. He'd tried a third time certified mail. He got a form letter from a lawyer he'd never heard of thanking outside parties for their interest and reminding them that Vortex did not accept unsolicited engineering submissions. And that's when Ethan understood 2 things. One, someone inside that company had erased him. Not just moved on from him, erased him. His name was gone from the plaque in the lobby. His designs were credited to the department. As far as Vortex Motorsport was concerned, Ethan Carter had never existed. Nobody was going to listen to a letter. Not in time. The only way to prove the flaw was real was to get inside that building and put his hands on the car. So he'd done the only thing he could think of. He'd applied for a maintenance job under his own name, betting correctly that whoever had scrubbed him from the design records had never bothered to flag him to HR, because who watches for a chief engineer to come back as a janitor? He'd gotten the badge. Number 471. And for 3 months, he'd mopped floors and fixed lifts and waited patient as stone for a chance to get close to the apex. The failure had come faster than he expected. And last night, alone in the dark, he'd finally gotten his hands on it and confirmed everything. The flaw was real, the seals were failing, and now he'd been thrown out on his knees before he could warn anyone who'd actually listen. That was the truth. That was the whole thing, and you cannot tell that to a 7-year-old. You've gone somewhere, Anna said, watching him over the rim of her cup. You always do that. Your eyes go, and the rest of you stays behind. Sorry. Where'd you go? Ethan almost told her. He came closer than he'd come in 3 years, but he just said, somewhere I don't like. Anna nodded slowly. She reached over and put her weathered hand on his. The girl doesn't need to know why the world is cruel, Ethan. She needs to know her father isn't afraid of it. You understand? Tell her the truth in a size she can hold. She squeezed his hand. You lost a job. You'll find another. That's the size she can hold. Lily came through the door at 3:20 with a drawing. Daddy? Daddy, look. We did families and I did ours, and Miss Rivera said mine was the best one because I put in detail. See, that's you, and that's me, and I gave you your work shirt with the little name patch. Ethan crouched down and took the drawing, and it just about took his legs out from under him. Two stick figures holding hands, a tall one and a small one. And on the tall one, drawn in careful blue crayon, a little rectangle on the chest with letters in it, Daddy. It's beautiful, Bug. His voice came out rough. It's the best one in the whole school. Miss Rivera's right. Can we put it on the fridge? Front and center. He hung it up. Then he sat down at the little kitchen table and patted the chair next to him. Hey, sit with me a sec. I gotta tell you something, and I want you to hear all of it, okay? Lily's face went serious. She was 7, but she was his, and she knew the difference between the small conversations and the big ones. She climbed into the chair. You in trouble? She asked. No, baby, I'm not in trouble. He took a breath. Tell her the truth in a size she can hold. I'm not going to be working at the car place anymore. She frowned. Did they fire you? Kids, no mercy and no lies in them. Yeah, he said. They did. Was it your fault? And there it was. The whole thing right there in a 7-year-old's question. He looked at her, her mother's eyes, her mother's chin, and he thought about all the answers he could give. He could say yes and protect their opinion of him. He could say no and start teaching her the world was unfair. Instead, he told her the truest thing he knew. No, he said. It wasn't my fault. I did the right thing. And sometimes when you do the right thing, people still get mad at you, and it still costs you something. That's one of the hardest things about being a grown-up, and I'm not going to pretend to you that it isn't. Lily thought about that with her whole face. Would you do it again? She asked. The right thing. Ethan felt his throat close. Yeah, he said. I'd do it again. Then it's okay. She said it simply, like it was obvious. She patted his hand, copying Anna without knowing it. We'll be okay, Daddy. You always fix everything. And Ethan Carter, who had held it together in front of 40 engineers, who had held it together throwing his own tools back in the box, who had held it together the entire drive home, put his hand over his eyes at his own kitchen table, and finally quietly came apart. Lily crawled into his lap and held on, and neither of them said anything for a while. Back at Vortex, the celebration had already started. By noon, the Apex was running clean on the dyno, flawless, powerful, the failure gone like it had never been. Champagne came out. Marcus Webb clapped shoulders and accepted congratulations and told the room more than once how proud he was of his team for pushing through the tough week. He did not mention the janitor. Nobody did. It was easier not to. Within a day, the story had quietly rewritten itself. In the telling, the engineering department had found the seal cracked. The mystery saved the car. The unauthorized man who'd actually done it became an awkward footnote, then a rumor, then nothing at all. Except Evelyn Vance couldn't let it go. She stood in Bay 3 that evening after everyone had gone home alone with the car, and she looked at the small white maintenance tag still sitting on the workbench where he'd left his badge. M. Mech. She'd fired the man. She'd thrown his tools. She'd done exactly what her father would have called the ugliest thing a leader can do, punish a man for being right in a room where you were wrong. She'd told herself it was about authority, about precedent, about the board and the sponsors and everything Webb had said. But now in the quiet one sentence kept coming back to her. It's not electronic. It's thermal. You can't find it on a screen. You find it with your hands. That was not how a janitor talked. She pulled up the personnel file on her tablet. Maintenance Mechanic 2, hired 3 months ago. And she stopped. Because the name on the file was Ethan Carter. The name meant nothing to her. Why would it? She'd been 25 and living in Boston when her father ran this company. She didn't know the old rosters. She didn't know the founding team. She knew the plaque in the lobby by heart, though every leader knew their own lobby plaque, and the plaque listed her father and 3 other founding names, and Ethan Carter was not one of them. So the name meant nothing. But something about the whole thing itched at her. The certainty in his voice. The way he'd pointed at 4 other SEALs without hesitating. The look he'd given Marcus Webb, and the way Marcus Webb had turned his back and refused to watch a man pick up his own tools. Evelyn Vance had inherited exactly one useful thing from her father, and it wasn't the company. It was an instinct that went off hard and cold whenever someone in a room was lying to her. And it was going off now. She looked at the 4 injector seals the man had named. Number 1, Number 4, both passenger bank. Then she picked up the phone and called the one engineer who hadn't celebrated. "Priya," she said, "it's Evelyn Vance. I need you to come back in tonight. I need you to pull 4 seals off the apex. And I need you not to tell Marcus Webb you're doing it." A pause on the line. "Which 4? Priya asked carefully. Evelyn looked at the tag one more time. "M-Mech. Number 1, she said. Number 4, both on the passenger bank." The silence on the other end told her everything. "How did you know which ones?" Priya finally whispered. "I didn't," Evelyn said. "He did." Across town, Ethan finally got Lily to sleep around 9. She'd insisted he read 3 chapters of the Whale book instead of 2 because it was a hard day, and he hadn't been able to argue with that. He pulled the blanket up over her, she'd kicked it off already, she always did, and he stood in the doorway a while the way he did every night watching her breathe. Then he went out to the little balcony and sat in Anna's plastic chair and looked at nothing. He'd have to start over. Again. New job somewhere far from cars, somewhere nobody would ever recognize the name he wasn't allowed to use. Maybe it was for the best. Maybe he'd been a fool to ever go back to think he could put his hands on a machine again without the machine putting its hands on him. But under all of it, quieter than the worry about rent, quieter than the sting of his own tools flying across the concrete, there was the thing that would not let him rest. 4 seals. He'd warned them. He'd said it out loud in front of everyone. He'd done everything a man could do, short of chaining himself to the car. If they raced it as is, and it failed, that was on them, not on him. He'd told himself that a dozen times on the drive home, and a dozen more since. It didn't help, because he could see it. He could see it the way he saw all his machines in motion. In his mind, the block heating through the early laps, the aluminum expanding degree by degree, the compromised seals holding, and then somewhere past lap 30, past the point of no return, the first one letting go. The power drop, the lockup, the wall coming up fast on the outside of turn 4 at 200 miles an hour. He could see the driver. Ethan pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes. "It's not your job anymore," he told himself. "You have no badge, no car, no name. There's nothing left you can do." His phone buzzed against the plastic chair. He almost didn't look at it. He figured it was a robocall, or the landlord or nothing. But he picked it up and the screen showed a number he didn't recognize a text from an hour ago that he'd missed while reading Lily the Whale book. He opened it. "This is Priya Sharma from Vortex Engineering. I got your number from Walt. I don't know if you'll ever read this. I need you to know we pulled the 4 seals tonight. Number 1, Number 4, both passenger bank." Ethan sat very still. All 4 were compromised. Exactly like you said. Exactly the same failure. His hands had gone cold. If we'd raced that car on Sunday, Marco would not have come home. You were right about all of it. He stared at the words in the dark, the phone glowing in his hand, 3 years of silence rising up in his chest all at once. And then the phone buzzed one more time, and a second message came through, and this one stopped his heart cold. "Miss Vance knows now. She's the one who told me to pull them. She's asking questions, Mr. Carter, about the old designs, about who really built the platform. And I think you should know she found something in the archive tonight that made her go white as a sheet." The word archive sat in Ethan's chest like a stone. He read Priya's second message 3 times, standing on the balcony in the dark, and each time, the same cold understanding spread through him. She found something that made her go white as a sheet. There was only one thing in that archive that could do that to Evelyn Vance. Only one thing that had been buried deep enough and long enough that finding it would knock the breath out of a person. His name. He typed back with hands that weren't quite steady. "Thank you for telling me. And thank you for pulling those seals. You saved a man's life tonight, Priya. Don't let anyone tell you different. 3 dots appeared, then vanished, then appeared again. You saved his life. I just did what you told me to. You listened, Ethan wrote. That's the whole thing. That's the only thing that ever mattered. He almost put the phone down. Then it buzzed again. She's going to want to talk to you. I don't know when, but she's not the person you think she is. I've worked for her 2 years. What she did to you this morning, that wasn't her. That was Marcus getting in her ear at the worst possible moment. I've seen him do it before. Ethan looked out at the parking lot at his old truck sitting under the one working streetlight. People are exactly who they are on their worst morning, he typed. Then he deleted it. It was true, but it was bitter, and bitterness was a thing he'd promised himself he wouldn't hand to a young woman who'd just done the bravest thing in that whole building. Instead, he wrote, "If she wants to talk, she knows where to find me. Good night, Priya. Go home. You've done enough for one night." He set the phone face down on the plastic chair, but he didn't go to bed. He sat out on that balcony for another hour in the cold, and he let himself feel the thing he'd been refusing to feel for 3 years. Not grief. He knew grief. Grief was an old roommate. This was something else. This was the feeling of a door he'd nailed shut, starting to creak open on its own. Somewhere across the city, Evelyn Vance was reading his name off a screen. And nothing was ever going to be simple again. At 11:40 that night, in the empty engineering wing of Vortex Motorsport, Evelyn Vance was staring at a design file that should not have existed. Priya had gone home an hour before. Evelyn had told her to. What Evelyn was doing now she wanted to do alone, because she had a feeling, the same cold instinct that had gone off in Bay 3, that whatever she found, she wasn't going to want a witness for. She'd started with the personnel file. Ethan Carter, maintenance mechanic 2. Nothing there but a social security number. A hire date 3 months back, and an emergency contact listed as Lily Carter, daughter, age 7. That last line had stopped her cold for a reason she couldn't name, so she'd gone deeper. She'd pulled the full company archive, the real one. The founding records her father had kept obsessively locked in a server. Most current employees didn't even know existed. She'd inherited the password along with the corner office. She'd never once used it. She used it now. She searched the name Carter, and 211 files came back. Evelyn sat there and scrolled, and the blood drained slowly out of her face, exactly the way Priya would later describe to a man across town who was sitting on a cold balcony, refusing to go to bed. Design specifications. Engine architecture. The original thermal management schematics for the platform. The platform. The one every Vortex car had run on for a decade. The one the company's entire fortune was built upon. And on every single document in the author field, in the signature block, in the little revision histories, her father had insisted on keeping, one name appeared over and over hundreds of times. E. Carter, Chief Design Engineer. She opened the very first schematic, the foundational one, the drawing that was in a real and legal sense the reason this company existed. And in the bottom corner, in her father's own handwriting, scanned and preserved, was a note. The best mind I ever hired. R.V. Evelyn couldn't breathe. She'd fired him. She'd screamed at him. She'd thrown his tools across the floor in front of 40 people and told a man to stop touching what he didn't understand, and the man had designed the thing. He hadn't guessed at the seal with a flashlight and dumb luck. He'd found it because he knew that engine the way a mother knows her child's cough in the dark. He knew it because he'd drawn it line by line years before any of the engineers she paid to celebrate tonight had ever set foot in the building. She scrolled faster now, hands shaking, and the story assembled itself in front of her in pieces. Ethan Carter hired at 26. Promoted to Chief Design Engineer at 28. The platform completed. The company transformed. And then 6 years ago, a gap. The files just stopped. His last entry was a design review dated a Thursday in October, and after that, nothing. No resignation letter in the archive, no exit interview, no record of why. He was there, and then he was gone, and the company had spent the next 6 years quietly credited his life's work to a department full of people who'd inherited it. But that wasn't the part that made her go white. The part that made her go white came when she cross-referenced the archive against the current company website. Against the lobby plaque she saw every single morning. Against the official History of Vortex that hung framed in the boardroom. Ethan Carter's name was in none of them. Not the plaque, not the website, not the history. Somewhere in the last 6 years, someone had gone through the public record of this company with surgical precision and removed him, erased him, reassigned his credits to the founding engineering team, and let his name vanish into that gray phrase. If Evelyn hadn't had access to her father's private server, a server most people didn't know existed, she would never have known Ethan Carter was anything more than a man who mopped floors. Someone had done this on purpose, and she had a sick, certain feeling she knew who. She looked at the revision histories again more carefully this time, and there it was buried in the metadata, the last person to modify the public credit files 6 years ago, the month after Ethan Carter vanished. M. Webb. Evelyn Vance sat alone in the dark engineering wing at midnight and understood all at once that she had been lied to since the day she took over her father's company. That the man everyone called her most trusted advisor had spent 6 years standing on another man's grave. That she had this morning in her ignorance done Marcus Webb's work for him, thrown out the one person alive who could expose it, and thanked Webb for the advice while she did it. She put her head in her hands. Then, because she was her father's daughter after all, she lifted it back up, and her jaw set, and the fear in her turned into something harder and more useful. She was going to fix this, all of it. But first she had to be sure, really sure, sure enough to survive a war with a man who'd spent 6 years covering his tracks. She couldn't move on Marcus Webb with a hunch. She needed proof he couldn't wriggle out of. She reached for her phone to call Priya back, and that was when she heard the footsteps in the hall. Slow, unhurried, the footsteps of a man who owned the place. The lights in the engineering wing were supposed to be off. Evelyn's screen was the only glow in the room, and into that glow at 10 past midnight walked Marcus Webb, still in his silk tie, holding 2 cups of coffee, like this was the most natural thing in the world. Burning the midnight oil. Evelyn. He set 1 cup down beside her without being asked. I saw the lights. Figured whoever it was could use this. He smiled. Big week, big win. You should be home celebrating, not haunting the office. Evelyn's hand moved casually and closed the archive file. The screen dropped to her home desktop, but not before Marcus Webb's eyes flicked to it. Just for a half second. And Evelyn, watching him the way her instinct had taught her to watch people, saw the exact moment he registered what had been on the screen, the exact moment his smile stayed on his face, while something behind his eyes went very cold and very alert. Couldn't sleep, she said lightly. You know how it is after a fire drill. Adrenaline. He sat on the edge of the desk, comfortable, proprietary. You did the right thing this morning, by the way. I know it wasn't easy. Firing someone never is. But you can't let people freelance on race-critical hardware. Set a precedent like that, and you've got chaos. He sipped his coffee. Your father understood that. Discipline, structure. It's what built this place. It's what built this place. Evelyn looked at him, and she thought about her father's handwriting on a schematic. The best mind I ever hired. And she wanted more than she had ever wanted anything to throw it in his smug, lying face. She didn't. You're right, she made herself say. It's what built this place. Because she wasn't ready. Because she needed proof. Because you don't tip off a man who spent 6 years erasing another man's existence. You let him think he's safe, and you build your case in the dark, and you don't move until the trap is closed. Her father had taught her that too. Get some sleep, Evelyn. Webb stood, patted the desk twice like he was patting a dog, and headed for the door. Then he paused. That maintenance fellow. The one from this morning. He didn't turn around. You didn't happen to catch his name, did you, for the incident report? HR'll want it. And there it was, the tell. The one careless thread pulled loose. Because Marcus Webb didn't need to ask HR for a name that was sitting right in the termination paperwork he'd stood 10 feet away from that morning. Marcus Webb was fishing. Marcus Webb wanted to know how much she knew. "You know I didn't," Evelyn lied smoothly. "It was chaos. I'll have HR pull it in the morning." "Good." His shoulders relaxed a fraction. "Good. Night, Evelyn?" "Night, Marcus." She waited until his footsteps faded all the way down the hall. She waited until she heard the far door close. And then Evelyn Vance let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for 6 years that weren't even hers, and she reopened the archive, and she started copying every single file to a private drive Marcus Webb would never be able to touch. If he wanted a war, he was going to get one. But it was going to be her war on her terms, and it was going to start the moment she had every last piece of it in her hands. Ethan didn't sleep much that night. He was up at 4:15 out of pure habit, and he stood in the kitchen making coffee for a job he no longer had, and he laughed at himself quietly in the dark. Old habits. He poured the coffee anyway. He looked at Lily's drawing on the fridge, the 2 stick figures, the little name patch that said Daddy, and he thought about how he was going to keep that patch honest, how he was going to find something, anything, to keep the lights on and the girl fed. At 8:30, after he'd walked Lily to the school bus and kissed the top of her head and watched her wave from the window until the bus turned the corner. His phone rang. Not a text this time. A call. A number he didn't recognize. He almost let it go to voicemail. Then something told him not to. "Hello." "Mr. Carter." A woman's voice. Careful, not Priya's. "This is Evelyn Vance." Ethan stood very still in the middle of the sidewalk. For a moment, neither of them said anything. 2 days ago, this woman had thrown his tools across a garage. Yesterday, she'd learned who he was. And now she was on the phone at 8:30 in the morning, and Ethan could hear underneath the careful control in her voice something he hadn't expected. Fear. And underneath the fear, shame. "Miss Vance," he said evenly, "I owe you an apology." She said it fast, like she'd been holding it in a fist, and had to let it out before she lost her nerve. "A real one, not a phone one. But I'm going to start with the phone one because I can't wait, because you didn't do anything wrong and I treated you like nothing. I threw your tools. I have never in my life done anything like that, and I did it to the one person in that building who was actually telling me the truth. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Ethan closed his eyes. He'd rehearsed 100 things to say to her if she ever called. Cold things, fair things, things about dignity and about what it does to a man to be thrown out on his knees. He didn't say any of them. "You pulled the seals," he said. "That's all I cared about. You could have celebrated that car and raced it, and I'd have spent the rest of my life reading the news waiting for the crash. You didn't. You listened even after you'd already decided I was nobody. That took more than most people have." He paused. "So thank you. We're square on the seals." He heard her breath catch on the other end. Like that was the last thing she'd expected grace from the man she'd wronged. "We're not square," she said quietly. "Not even close. Mr. Carter, I found the archive." "I know," Priya told me. "Then you know what I found. Your name. On everything. The platform. The engine architecture. My father's handwriting calling you—" Her voice cracked. "The best mind he ever hired. And then I found that someone erased you. Wiped you off the plaque, off the website, off the whole history of this company. And I know who did it. And I need your help to prove it, because right now all I have is a name in the metadata, and a very smart man who spent 6 years making sure this day never came." Ethan stood on the sidewalk. A city bus rolled past. Somewhere a dog was barking, and the door he'd nailed shut 3 years ago swung all the way open. "Marcus Webb," he said. Yes, he was the one who insisted the design review couldn't be moved. Ethan heard his own voice go somewhere far away. "The day my wife died. He knew she was in the hospital. He knew it was the last day. And he told me the review couldn't wait, that the old man was counting on me, that the platform came first." He stopped. He'd never said this out loud to another living soul. "I missed it. I wasn't there when I was in a meeting. because Marcus Webb said the meeting mattered more. Dead silence on the line. "So no," Ethan said, and his voice came back hard now, steadier than he felt. "It doesn't surprise me at all that he erased me. He probably couldn't stand looking at my name after what he did. Easier to pretend I never existed than to remember he cost a man his last hour with his wife, so a car could get built on schedule." "Mr. Carter." Evelyn's voice was barely a whisper. "I am so sorry. I had no idea any of that." "You couldn't have. You were a kid in Boston." He rubbed his face with his free hand. "That's not on you. None of the old stuff is on you. The only thing on you is yesterday morning, and you just apologized for that, and I accepted it. So let's not carry things that aren't ours to carry. There's enough real weight to go around." He heard her exhale shaky on the other end. And something shifted between them. In that moment, two people who'd started as enemies 2 days ago standing on opposite sides of a lie. They were both in different ways victims of. "I need you to come in," Evelyn said. "Not as a janitor, not even as an engineer. I need you to come in and help me nail him. You're the only person alive who can look at what he changed on that platform and tell me exactly what he did and when. You designed it. You'll see his fingerprints where nobody else can." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "Miss Vance, I've got a 7-year-old daughter and no job and no reason on earth to walk back into that building except to reopen the worst chapter of my life. I know. You're asking me to bleed for a company that erased me. I know that too." A pause. "But I'm also asking you to make sure it never happens to anyone else. He changed your platform to chase lap times. He stripped out safety systems you built to keep drivers alive. Those 4 seals we pulled last night. That's just the one that surfaced. If he did that to one part of your design. Mr. Carter, what else did he touch? What else is out there on every car we've built for 6 years, running on tracks right now with your safety margins quietly cut out to save weight?" And that was the thing. That was the thing Ethan couldn't walk away from, and Evelyn Vance, sharper than he'd given her credit for 2 days ago, knew it. Because it wasn't about his name. It had never been about his name. He'd have died a janitor in perfect peace if that was all it was. It was about the drivers. It had always only been about the drivers. "How many cars run that platform?" he asked quietly. "Ours and 4 customer teams. 9 cars total, racing every weekend. 9 cars, 9 drivers. 9 men who strapped themselves into machines that Ethan Carter had built to keep them alive, and that Marcus Webb had quietly gutted to make faster." Ethan looked down the street toward the corner where the school bus had disappeared with his daughter on it. He thought about the deal he'd made with himself 3 years ago. Never be great again. Just be there. And he understood, standing on that sidewalk, that the two things had finally collided, and that there was no version of himself that could look his daughter in the eye tonight and tell her he'd stayed home while men climbed into cars he knew were unsafe. Would you do it again? The right thing? Yeah, I'd do it again. "I'll come in," he said. "But we do it my way, quiet. We don't tip him off. We build it airtight, and when we move once and he doesn't get up." He paused. "And Miss Vance, I'm not coming back to work for you. I'm coming in to finish something. When it's done, I'm done. Are we clear?" "Clear?" she said, though he could hear that she'd hoped for something else. "Then I'll see you this afternoon. Not the front door, the service entrance. Have Walt let me in." "Why the service entrance?" "Because if Marcus Webb sees me walk through the front door 2 days after you fired me, he'll know the game's up before we've even started. Right now, he thinks I'm a beaten man who disappeared. Let him keep thinking it. It's the only advantage we've got." He hung up. And he stood on the sidewalk a moment longer in the cold morning light, feeling the whole shape of his life bend in a direction he hadn't chosen and couldn't refuse. Then he called Anna next door and asked if she could take Lily after school. Just for a few hours. He had something he needed to do. Ethan came in through the service entrance at 2:15 that afternoon, and Walt was waiting for him with a look on his face like he'd seen a ghost. "They told me to let you in." Walt kept his voice low. "Didn't tell me why, but I got a feeling I'm about to find out things I'm too old to be finding out." "You want out, Walt? Now's the time." Walt considered it. Then he snorted. 68 years old. Bad knee. Wife's been gone 4 years, and my kids call twice a month if I'm lucky. He held the door wider. Whatever this is, son, it's the most interesting thing that's happened to me since Reagan. Get in here. Evelyn met them in a small conference room off the engineering wing, one with no windows to the main floor chosen on purpose. Priya was already there, and when Ethan walked in, the young engineer stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. Mr. Carter. She didn't seem to know what to do with her hands. I don't know how you saved his life. Marcos. And I just want to say yesterday when they fired you I should have done more. You did the thing that mattered, Ethan said gently. You pulled the seals. Everything else is noise. He looked around the room at Evelyn, at Priya, at Walt, hovering in the doorway, and something in his chest tightened at the strangeness of it. 2 days ago, he'd been invisible in this building. Now, 3 people were looking at him like he was the answer to a question that scared them. All right, he said, setting his toolbox on the table, the same toolbox she'd thrown the tools inside, it cleaned and recradled. Show me what he changed. Evelyn turned her laptop around and pulled up 2 schematics side by side. The original, his original from the archive, and the current production version. Ethan leaned in, and for a long, long moment he said nothing at all, because he could see it, all of it. 6 years of a man's quiet betrayal laid out in engineering lines that only Ethan Carter in all the world could fully read. He could see where the thermal management channels had been narrowed to save weight, the exact change that had cooked those seals. He could see where a secondary fuel cutoff had been deleted entirely, a failsafe he'd spent 2 months designing gone. He could see where the crash structure in the side pod had been thinned by 4 millimeters. 4 millimeters, that would be the difference between a driver walking away from a side impact and a driver not walking away at all. Change after change after change. Every one of them chasing speed. Every one of them paid for in safety. Every one of them made after Ethan was gone, credited to a department hidden inside revision histories. Nobody but the designer would ever think to question. Mr. Carter, Evelyn said quietly. What is it? What do you see? Ethan straightened up slowly. His face had gone pale, and his hands, when he lifted them from the table, were trembling, not with fear now, but with a cold and terrible anger he hadn't let himself feel in 6 years. He didn't just erase me, Ethan said. That would have been bad enough, but that's not the worst thing he did. He turned the laptop so they could all see, and he pointed at the deleted fuel cutoff, at the narrowed cooling channels, at the 4 missing millimeters of crash structure. Every single one of these changes makes the car faster, and every single one of them makes it more likely to kill the man driving it. He knew that. You can't make these changes by accident. He looked at safety systems I built to bring drivers home, and he decided 1/10 of a second per lap was worth more than their lives. The room had gone silent. Priya had her hand over her mouth. Walt had come all the way into the room. How many people know these designs changed? Ethan asked. Just the department, Priya said. And we inherited the platform. Nobody questions the platform. It's just how the car is. We optimize on top of it. We never look underneath, which is exactly what he counted on. Ethan nodded slowly. Nobody looks underneath. Nobody questions the foundation. He buried it so deep that the only person who could ever find it was a man he was sure would never come back. He looked at Evelyn. But I came back, and in that moment, in that windowless room surrounded by the wreckage of a lie 6 years deep, something happened that none of them expected. Evelyn Vance, CEO of Vortex Motorsport. The woman who 2 days ago had thrown this man's tools across a garage floor reached out and put her hand flat on the table between them and said the words that would change everything that came after. Then help me end him, she said. Not just for you, for every driver on every one of those 9 cars. Tell me what you need and it's yours. I don't care what it costs. I don't care what it does to this company's reputation. My father built this place on the mind of the man he trusted most, and that man is you. And I will burn Marcus Webb to the ground before I let him profit off your work for one more day." Ethan looked at her for a long moment, and for the first time in 3 years, the quiet man who fixed drains and packed his daughter's lunch at 4:40 in the morning felt the old fire come back to life in his chest. The fire he'd buried with his wife. The fire that built championship machines. The fire that had never really gone out at all. "The first thing I need," he said slowly, "is every service record on all 9 cars. Because if he thinned the crash structure on the platform, then somewhere out there right now is a car with 4 missing millimeters between a driver and a wall. And this weekend at least one of those cars is racing." He looked around the room. "So before we worry about proving anything, before we worry about Marcus Webb or my name or any of it, we have exactly one job." He set his hand on his toolbox. "We have to make sure everybody comes home Sunday." The service records came up on the screen at 3:40 that afternoon, and within 90 seconds, Ethan Carter knew they had a problem worse than anything he'd imagined. "Stop," he said. "Go back. That one, the blue file." Priya scrolled back. It was the service log for a car that didn't belong to Vortex at all. A customer team, one of the 4 outfits that leased the platform and ran it under their own colors. The Ridgeline team out of Georgia. And their car chassis number 7 was entered in Sunday's race. "That's not our car," Evelyn said. "We can pull ours. We can find a reason to hold Marco's car back, blame it on the seals, nobody questions it. But a customer team we can't touch," Ethan finished. "We can't pull their car, we can't inspect it, we can't even walk into their garage without a reason." He leaned back and the color had gone out of his face again. "And chassis 7 has the thinned crash structure. 4 millimeters. I can see it in the build spec right here. Whoever's driving that car Sunday is driving it with a side pod that'll fold like paper in a hard hit." The room went quiet. "Who's their driver?" Ethan asked. Priya pulled it up. "Danny Reyes, 23. Rookie. It's his..." She swallowed. "It's his first full season. 23 years old. First full season." Ethan closed his eyes for a second, and in that second he saw the whole ugly machinery of it, a kid chasing a dream strapped into a car he trusted with his life, sitting on a flaw that a man in a silk tie had built in to shave 1/10 of a second off a lap time. "Okay." Ethan opened his eyes. "Okay, here's the thing. We've got 2 completely separate problems, and we're about to make a mistake if we blur them together. Problem 1 is Marcus Webb proving what he did, ending him getting your name and your company clean. That problem can wait. That problem is patient." He tapped the screen. "This is problem 2, and problem 2 is racing in 4 days, and it does not care one bit about our case against Webb. And if we spend all our energy building the perfect trap for Marcus while Danny Reyes climbs into that car on Sunday, then we're no better than the man we're trying to catch." Evelyn was nodding slowly, but her face was tight. "How do we warn a customer team that their car is unsafe without telling them how we know? The second I call Ridgeline and say, your crash structure's compromised, the first question is, how do you know that? And the answer is, because our former chief engineer who we fired as a janitor 2 days ago designed the original platform and spotted the change. The whole thing unravels. Webb hears about it inside an hour. Then we don't tell them why," Ethan said. "We give them a reason they can accept without questions." "Which is..." Ethan thought about it. And then a slow, grim understanding crossed his face. "A recall," he said. "A safety recall, on the platform. From the manufacturer, from you. You don't have to explain a flaw you found. You announce a flaw you're investigating. You tell all 4 customer teams and your own team that Vortex has identified a potential structural concern in a batch of chassis, and you're mandating an immediate inspection before anyone races. No blame, no detail. Just, we found something, we're being cautious, nobody runs until we've looked. Every driver comes off the track Sunday. Every car gets pulled apart. And when they pull chassis 7 apart, they find the thin crash structure on their own. And it looks like exactly what it's supposed to look like. Diligence, not a smoking gun." Evelyn stared at him. She exhaled. "That's brilliant. And it costs us a fortune. and it makes us look like we build unsafe cars, and the sponsors will lose their minds, and—" She stopped. "And it saves 9 drivers. Do it. I'll draft the recall tonight." "You can't," Ethan said. "What? You can't be the one who signs it." He leaned forward. "Think about it. If you personally issue an emergency recall on the platform 48 hours after firing a maintenance mechanic in front of the whole department, Marcus Webb is going to ask one question and one question only. What changed? He's a smart man. He'll connect the two events in about 4 seconds, and the moment he does, he starts destroying evidence. The metadata, the revision logs, everything that ties him to the changes. He'll bury it deeper than he did the first time, and this time, he'll know we're looking." Evelyn sat back. "So the recall has to come from somewhere that doesn't point at me." "It has to come from the system," Ethan said. "From a routine process, something that looks like it would have happened anyway." He turned to Priya. "Who runs quality assurance? Who has the authority to flag a chassis batch for inspection without going through Webb or the CEO?" Priya hesitated. "That would be—" "Technically, that's the QA director, Frank Delgado. But Frank reports to Marcus. Everything QA does crosses Marcus's desk. That's—" Her eyes widened. "That's how Webb's controlled all of this. He's the choke point. Nothing about the platform moves without him seeing it." And there it was. The reason 6 years of a lie had held. Marcus Webb hadn't just erased a man. He'd built himself into the exact position where every path that might expose him ran directly under his own eyes. Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he said the thing none of them wanted to hear. "Then we can't go through the system at all, because the system runs through him." He looked at Evelyn. "Which means the recall has to come from you after all. And it means the second you issue it, the clock starts. Webb will know something's wrong, and he'll start covering his tracks, and we'll be in a race, us building the case, him destroying the evidence. So before you sign one word of that recall, we need to have already copied every file that matters. Everything. Tonight. Because tomorrow morning, when that recall goes out, Marcus Webb is going to start burning his house down, and we need to already have photographs of every room." Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. Then she stood. "I copied the archive last night," she said. "The founding server. His metadata's in there. The modification logs, the credit reassignments, all of it. He can't touch that server. It's my father's, and I'm the only one with the password." She paused. "But you're right that the current production files are exposed. If he starts altering the live revision histories to make his changes look like they came from the department, or from you, or from anyone but him, he could flip the whole thing," Ethan said grimly. "That's the danger. Right now the metadata says M. Webb made those changes, but metadata can be edited by someone with enough access. If he gets ahead of us, he could rewrite it to say E. Carter made those changes, and then suddenly the story isn't brilliant engineer erased by a saboteur. It's disgraced engineer built dangerous cars and disappeared and the company cleaned up his mess." He let that sit. "He could make me the villain of my own life. And I'd have no way to prove otherwise because who's going to believe the janitor?" The room went cold and still. "Then we copy it all tonight," Evelyn said. "Every production file, every revision log, time stamped on my private drive before he wakes up tomorrow. And we do it now." They worked until nearly 10 o'clock. Priya pulled the production files. Ethan went through each one, flagging every change Webb had made, building a list not from memory, but from the drawings themselves. Every altered line documented, every deleted safety system, named every compromise cataloged. Evelyn copied everything to a drive that lived in a safe deposit box. Her father had left her a drive Marcus Webb would never know existed. Walt stood watch at the door of the wing and told the 2 night shift cleaners who wandered by that the CEO was doing quarterly review, nobody in or out. And the cleaners who knew Walt and liked him nodded and went the other way. At 9:50, Ethan sat back from the screen and rubbed his eyes, and for the first time all evening, the 4 of them just sat there in the quiet, the enormity of what they were doing settling over them. "Can I ask you something?" Priya said finally to Ethan. "You don't have to answer, but 6 years ago, why'd you leave?" "You were chief design engineer. You built all of this. Why would a man just walk away from that? Ethan was quiet for so long that she started to apologize. My wife died, he said simply. Priya's face fell. I'm sorry, I didn't. It's all right. He looked at the screen at the drawings at his own 6-year-old handwriting in the revision fields. Her name was Sarah. She got sick fast, the kind of fast nobody's ready for. And I kept working through it because there was always a reason to stay one more hour. And I told myself I was building a future for her and our little girl. He stopped. I was in a design review the night she died. This building, this wing, maybe this room. Somebody told me the meeting couldn't be moved, and I believed him. And I missed the last hour of my wife's life for a car. Nobody said anything. Walt by the door had taken off his cap and was holding it. After that, I couldn't look at any of it. Ethan went on quieter now. Every line I'd drawn, every part I'd built, it was all soaked in those 8 months I spent choosing work over her. So I left. I took Lily, and I disappeared, and I became a man who fixes drains because a man who fixes drains goes home at 5 o'clock every single day and never misses a bedtime. That was the deal I made with myself. Never be great again. Just be there for my daughter all the way, every day, the way I wasn't there for her mother. He looked up. And I kept that deal for 3 years. Until I saw a photo of the new car in a doctor's office and realized somebody had changed my platform in a way that was going to get a driver killed. And I couldn't unsee it. So I came back not as an engineer, because I couldn't be one anymore, as a janitor, to get close enough to prove it before somebody died. Evelyn had gone very still. Who told you the meeting couldn't be moved? She asked, though Ethan could see in her face that she already knew. Marcus Webb, Ethan said. And the silence that followed was the loudest thing in the room, because now they all understood not just what Marcus Webb had done to a company, but what he'd done to a man. He hadn't just erased Ethan Carter from a plaque. He'd been the one who kept him in that meeting. Whether Webb had known how sick Sarah was, whether he'd done it out of cruelty or ambition, or simple monstrous indifference to anything but the schedule, it didn't matter. The result was the same. Marcus Webb had cost Ethan Carter the last hour of his wife's life. And then, when grief drove Ethan out the door, Marcus Webb had quietly stepped into the empty space and taken everything the man left behind. He built his whole career on your grave, Evelyn said softly. Literally. He used the worst night of your life to get rid of you, and then he took your work and your name and your credit, and he's been living off it for 6 years. Yeah, Ethan said. I figure he has. And you came back anyway, knowing you'd have to walk back into the building where she couldn't finish it. I came back for the drivers, Ethan said. Not for him, not for the company, not even for my name. I'd have gone to my grave a janitor and been fine with it, Miss Vance. But I couldn't let a kid like Danny Reyes climb into a car I designed to keep him safe gutted by a man who cared more about lap times than lives. I couldn't do it. Some things you can't walk past. Evelyn Vance looked at this man. This man, she'd screamed at this man, whose tools she'd thrown. This man who'd lost more than she could imagine, and come back not for revenge, but to save strangers. And something in her broke open, and rearranged itself permanently into a new shape. We're going to fix all of it, she said. Her voice was steady now, and there was something of her father in it. The recall goes out tomorrow. We save the drivers, and then we build the case brick by brick, and we take everything back. Your name, your work, your legacy, and we make sure the world knows exactly who Marcus Webb is. One thing at a time, Ethan said. Drivers first. Drivers first, she agreed. They left the building separately on purpose at 10-minute intervals. Ethan went out the service entrance last, and Walt walked him to his truck in the dark. That's a hell of a thing you carried by yourself, Walt said. 3 years, and you never told a soul. Wasn't anybody's to carry but mine. Well? Walt stuck out his weathered hand. For whatever it's worth from an old man with a bad knee, I always knew you were somebody. Nobody scrubs a floor the way you did who wasn't somebody first. You did it like it mattered, like the floor deserved your best. He shook Ethan's hand firmly. Go home to your girl." The recall went out at 8 o'clock the next morning. Evelyn had drafted it herself at 4 a.m. Careful and precise, and she'd routed it directly through the customer team's safety liaisons, bypassing the internal QA chain, entirely bypassing Marcus Webb. By 8:15, all 4 customer teams and Vortex's own race operation had received a mandatory stand-down. No chassis from the affected production batch was to be raced or track-tested until a full structural inspection was completed. Effective immediately. Signed, Evelyn Vance, CEO. By 8:40, Marcus Webb was standing in her office. He didn't knock. He came through the door with 2 spots of color high on his cheeks and a printout of the recall in his fist. And Evelyn, who had been waiting for exactly this, who had spent the last hour preparing her face, looked up from her desk with an expression of mild, unbothered executive calm. "Marcus, morning. What is this?" He dropped the printout on her desk. "A platform recall issued overnight routed around QA around me to our customer teams without a single word to your head of engineering." "Evelyn, do you have any idea what this does to us? The sponsors, the press. You've just told the entire industry that Vortex builds unsafe cars 4 days before the biggest race of the season. I've told the industry that Vortex takes safety seriously enough to stand down a car it isn't sure about," Evelyn said evenly. "There's a difference. And I'd think my head of engineering would agree that a possible structural concern is worth 4 days and some bad press." "There is no structural concern." Webb's voice sharpened. "That platform has run clean for 6 years. 9 cars, hundreds of races, not one structural failure. Where is this coming from? What concern? Based on what?" And there it was, the question she'd known was coming. Based on what? The whole game turned on how she answered it. Ethan had walked her through this at 4 in the morning over the phone, both of them running on no sleep. Don't lie about the source, because a lie you can be caught in. Give him a truth that's technically complete and tells him nothing. "Based on the seal failures we found on Marco's car this week," Evelyn said. 4 compromised seals, all thermal, all in the same batch. When I saw 4 identical failures in one production run, I asked myself a simple question. If one part of this batch was compromised, what else might be? So I ordered a full structural inspection across every chassis from the affected run. That's not paranoia, Marcus. That's basic engineering diligence. My father would have done the same thing. It was Ethan had pointed out entirely true. Every word of it. She had found 4 failed seals. She had asked what else might be wrong. She simply left out the part where a former chief engineer had told her precisely what else was wrong and precisely why. And Evelyn watched Marcus Webb's face as he tried to find the seam in it, tried to find the lie he was certain was there and couldn't. Because there wasn't one. Just a truth with a hole in the middle, exactly the shape of a man he thought he'd erased. "The seal failures were a fluke," Webb said, but there was the faintest crack in his certainty now. "A bad batch of seals from a supplier. It has nothing to do with the chassis structure. Then the inspection will confirm that, and we'll all feel better, and we'll have lost 4 days," Evelyn said pleasantly. "And if it doesn't confirm that, then I'll have saved 9 drivers' lives, and no amount of bad press will make me sorry. Either way, Marcus, the recall stands. It's already out. It's not a discussion." For a moment, just a moment, Marcus Webb looked at her differently than he ever had. He'd spent 2 years managing her, steering her, playing on her fear of being underestimated. And now, for the first time, he was looking at her the way you look at an opponent, recalculating. "You've changed," he said quietly. "Since this week. You seem very sure of yourself all of a sudden." "I'm my father's daughter," Evelyn said. "It was bound to catch up with me eventually." Webb held her gaze a second longer. Then he picked his printout back up, folded it with slow, deliberate care, and turned to go. At the door, he paused the same way he had 2 nights ago in the engineering wing. "That maintenance man," he said, not turning around. "The one you fired. Carter was it." Evelyn's heart stopped. She kept her voice flat. "I don't recall the name. HR would have it." A long pause. "It's just funny. I pulled the security logs this morning routine after the recall wanting to see who'd been in the engineering wing, and your badge was in there 2 nights running. Very late, both nights. He finally turned and his face was perfectly pleasant and his eyes were ice. Long hours for a CEO. I hope you're not overworking yourself, Evelyn. It's easy to make mistakes when you're tired, easy to trust the wrong people. And he left. Evelyn sat perfectly still until his footsteps faded. Then she picked up her phone with a hand that had started very slightly to shake, and she texted Ethan 4 words. He pulled the security logs. The reply came in under a minute. How much can he see? My badge in the wing. Both nights. Late. He knows I've been digging. Does he know about me? Does the badge log show a service entrance entry 3 days after you fired a maintenance mechanic? Evelyn's blood ran cold. Because she didn't know. She'd had Walt let Ethan in, but Walt had used his own guard credentials to open the service door. Hadn't he? Or had Ethan's old badge still been active in the system? She didn't know how the log would read. She typed with unsteady fingers. I don't know. Walt let you in. I don't know how it logged. There was a long pause, longer than any of the others. And then Ethan's reply came, and it made her stomach drop straight through the floor. Then we have a problem. Because if that log shows a terminated employee entered the building through the service door, and Marcus Webb is already pulling logs, then he's about 90 seconds from knowing exactly who's been helping you. And the moment he knows it's me, the moment he knows the one person alive who can read his sabotage is back inside your building. He stops covering his tracks quietly. What does he do instead? Evelyn typed. He goes on offense. He gets to the evidence before we can present it. And he does it the same way he did it 6 years ago, by making sure nobody will ever believe the man standing in his way. Evelyn stared at the screen. Down the hall, faintly, she could hear Marcus Webb's office door close. How do you know he'll do that? Because I know exactly what he's capable of. He proved it 6 years ago. A man who can look at another man's dying wife and decide the meeting matters more. That man doesn't have a bottom, Evelyn. There's no line he won't cross. We just watched him smile at you while he threatened you. He's not scared, he's hunting. Her phone buzzed one more time. Get the drive out of the building, today. Right now if you can. Everything we copied, get it somewhere. He can't reach somewhere that isn't tied to your name or mine. Because I promise you, the next 48 hours, he's going to come at this from a direction we haven't thought of yet. And the only way we survive it is if the proof is already somewhere safe when he does. Evelyn was already standing, already reaching for her coat, already moving toward the elevator with the drive from the safe deposit box heavy in her bag, when Priya came around the corner at a dead-run phone in her hand, her face the color of ash. Miss Vance? Priya could barely get the words out. The archive. Your father's server. The one he can't touch. She held up her phone. Somebody just tried to access it. 6 failed password attempts in the last 10 minutes. From a terminal inside the building. Evelyn felt the floor tilt. That's impossible, she said. Nobody has that password but me. Nobody even knows that server exists except... And then she stopped. Because there was one other person who might know it existed. One person who'd been at this company since the very beginning. One person who'd worked side by side with her father in the founding years, back when that server was built, back when the passwords were first set. One person who'd had 6 years and total access to go looking for anything her father might have left behind. He knows about the server, Evelyn whispered. Ethan Marcus knows about my father's server. He's trying to get in. And if he gets in... She didn't finish. She didn't have to. Because they both understood in that frozen second that everything they'd built their case on the metadata. The revision logs her father's handwriting. The one clean, untouchable copy of the truth was sitting behind a password that a man with 6 years of access and nothing left to lose had just started trying to break. Evelyn called Ethan before the elevator doors even closed. He's trying to break into the server, right now. 6 failed attempts. Then he doesn't have the password yet. Ethan's voice was fast, sharp. The voice of a man who'd already stopped being afraid and started thinking. 6 failures means he's guessing. Does that server lock out after a certain number of attempts? Evelyn's mind raced. I don't know. My father set it up. I never... Find out. Now. If it locks, we've got breathing room. If it doesn't, he'll brute force it eventually, and we're done. A pause. And, Evelyn, where are you right now? Elevator going down. I've got the drive in my bag. Good. Keep going. Don't stop. Don't go back for anything. Get in your car and get that drive to the safe deposit box or a lawyer or anywhere that isn't that building. The server might fall, but if we've got the physical copy off-site, we still have the truth. 2 copies. He can only reach 1. Evelyn's hand tightened on her phone. And if he gets into the server before I get the drive out? If he alters the metadata, rewrites the logs to make it look like you made those changes? Then it becomes his copy against ours. His altered server against your clean off-site drive, both time-stamped. And that's a fight we can win, but only if the drive is safe. So move. The elevator opened on the ground floor. Evelyn walked fast across the lobby past the plaque that had her father's name on it, and not Ethan's, past the 10-foot photos of drivers who trusted their lives to machines a liar had gutted, and out into the cold parking lot toward her car. She'd made it exactly halfway when she heard the voice behind her. Leaving so soon, Evelyn? Evelyn. She turned. Marcus Webb was standing by the entrance, hands in his pockets, calm as a Sunday morning. He must have come down the other elevator. He must have watched her cross the lobby. I've got a meeting off-site, she said, and hated how her voice caught. Do you? He walked toward her unhurried. It's just you seem to be in an awful hurry for a woman with a meeting, and you've got that bag clutched to you like it's got the crown jewels in it. He smiled. What's in the bag, Evelyn? For one terrible second she couldn't speak. And then 26 years of being her father's daughter came up under her like a floor. Files, she said flatly. For the meeting, which I'm late for. Was there something you needed, Marcus? Or are you just going to keep interrogating your CEO in a parking lot? The smile flickered, just slightly, because that was not the voice of a frightened woman, and Marcus Webb had spent 2 years counting on a frightened woman. Of course not, he said smoothly. Drive safe. And he stepped aside. She got in her car. She started it. Her hands were shaking so badly, it took her 3 tries to get the key turned, and she could feel Webb watching her the whole time through the windshield, that pleasant, patient, predatory calm. She pulled out of the lot. She made 2 turns she didn't need to make watching her mirror, and only when she was certain no one was following did she pull over and call Ethan back. I'm out. I've got the drive. He tried to stop me in the parking lot, asked what was in the bag. What did you tell him? That it was files for a meeting and to mind his business. A short pause, and then unexpectedly a low laugh from Ethan. That's exactly what your father would have said. You're gonna be all right, Evelyn. Something in her chest loosened just for a second. Then it tightened right back up. The server, Ethan. If he gets in, get the drive locked away first, then call me. We'll deal with the server, one thing at a time. A beat. Drivers first remember same rule. Nearest fire first. At 11:20 that morning, Evelyn Vance put a hard drive containing the entire truth of her company into a safe deposit box at a bank 3 miles from Vortex in a vault Marcus Webb didn't know existed under her mother's maiden name. And for the first time all day, she breathed. Then she called Ethan back, and they turned to the server. The problem, Ethan explained, was one of time. Even if Webb couldn't guess the password, a man with enough technical resources and enough motivation could eventually get in, or worse, could simply have the server wiped. He can't read what's on it without the password, Ethan said. But can he destroy it? Does he have the access to just delete the whole thing, password or not? Evelyn went cold, because the answer she realized was yes. Marcus Webb was head of engineering. He'd been at the company since its founding. If anyone besides her had administrative rights to the physical servers, it was him. He might not be able to open her father's archive, but he might very well be able to burn the whole rack to the ground. Then the server's already lost, Ethan said quietly. Assume it's gone. Assume by tonight there's nothing on that machine but scorched earth. It doesn't matter because we've got the drive. The clean copy's off-site. He can destroy the original, but he can't destroy ours, and he doesn't even know ours exists. A pause. But it tells us something important, Evelyn. It tells us he's decided to stop being careful. A man who wipes a server isn't covering his tracks anymore. He's declaring war, which means we don't have days. We have hours. We move on him now today before he figures out how deep this goes. Move on him how we agreed we needed the case airtight. We did, and it is. We've got your father's handwriting naming me chief engineer. We've got the archive metadata showing M. Webb reassigned my credits the month after I disappeared. We've got the production files showing every safety system he stripped out documented line by line. And in about, Ethan checked something, 2 hours. We're going to have the one thing that turns all of it from a paperwork dispute into a crime the whole world can see. What's that? Chassis 7, Ethan said. The Ridgeline car, the one with the thin crash structure. Your recall goes into effect this afternoon. The inspection's scheduled for 2 o'clock. When they pull that side pod apart and find 4 millimeters of missing crash structure that no engineer would ever remove by accident, that's not metadata anymore, Evelyn. That's a physical object. A real car with a real flaw that would have killed a real 23-year-old kid on Sunday. You can argue about revision logs forever. You can't argue with a hole in a crash structure that everyone can see with their own eyes. Evelyn understood then the whole shape of what Ethan had built. He hadn't been chasing revenge. He'd been chasing proof of a kind that couldn't be erased. Metadata could be rewritten. Servers could be wiped. Handwriting could be dismissed as forgery. But a physical car inspected in front of witnesses with a safety system visibly and deliberately removed, that was a truth Marcus Webb could not touch, could not delete, could not smile his way out of. That's why you came in as a janitor, she said slowly. Not just to find the flaw, to find physical proof. Something he couldn't reach. A man learns things. Ethan said about what survives and what doesn't. Paper burns, servers crash. People forget or get paid to forget. But a machine with a flaw in it, that machine tells the truth to anybody who knows how to look. It can't lie. It can't be bribed. It just sits there being exactly what it is. A pause. I've trusted machines more than people for a long time, Evelyn. They've never once let me down. At 1:50 that afternoon, the inspection of Chassis 7 began, and Marcus Webb was there. Evelyn had expected that. Of course he'd be there. He couldn't afford not to be. If there was any chance the inspection turned up something that pointed at him, he needed to be standing right next to it, ready to explain it away, ready to redirect, ready to do the thing he'd done for 6 years, control the story before anyone else could tell it. What Marcus Webb did not expect was that Evelyn had asked for the inspection to be recorded. Cameras, independent witnesses. A safety officer from the sanctioning body, invited by Evelyn personally that morning, standing right there with a clipboard. Full transparency, she'd told Webb pleasantly when he objected. If we're going to eat the bad press of a recall, Marcus, we're going to be seen doing it right. The whole industry's watching. Let them watch us be thorough. He couldn't argue with that without looking like he had something to hide. So he stood there in a room full of cameras and witnesses and watched the Ridgeline mechanics pull apart the side pod of Chassis 7. And Evelyn watched him, watched the exact moment the crash structure came into view. Watched a lifetime of composure cost him everything it had to keep his face still. That's the Ridgeline chief mechanic, a grizzled man named Boone, who'd been building race cars for 30 years, frowned and leaned in. That's not right. Hand me the calipers. He measured again, straightened up slowly, and his face had gone hard. This crash structure's 4 mil under spec, 4 millimeters. He looked around the room. That's not a manufacturing tolerance. That's not wear. Somebody built this car with a thin side pod on purpose. This is a design change. Who signs off on platform design changes? And the room slowly turned to look at Marcus Webb. 12 years. Ethan Carter had spent learning to read the small failures in machines, the whisper of fuel above a certain temperature, the micro gap that only opened under heat. And if he'd been in that room, he'd have recognized what happened to Marcus Webb's face in that moment as exactly the same kind of failure. A structure that had held under enormous load for 6 years, finding all at once the one flaw that brought the whole thing down. But Webb hadn't survived 6 years by breaking easily. "That's a serious finding," he said. And his voice was steady, grave concern, the voice of a man who'd never seen this car before in his life. "And it's exactly why the recall was the right call. Evelyn, you were absolutely right to be cautious." He turned to the safety officer. "I want a full investigation. Whoever made this change endangered a driver. We'll pull every record, find out who signed off, and hold them accountable. This is precisely the kind of thing we cannot tolerate at Vortex." And Evelyn, watching him, felt a cold admiration curdle in her stomach, because it was masterful. In 4 sentences, he'd flipped it. He'd agreed the change was a crime. He'd volunteered to investigate it. He'd positioned himself as the man who'd hunt down the villain, knowing that he controlled the records, knowing that when he found the culprit, the trail would lead exactly where he decided it led. He was already writing the ending, and in his ending, the villain wore whatever name he chose to assign. Probably Evelyn thought the name would be Carter. "I agree completely," Evelyn said. "A full investigation, every record." She smiled at him. "In fact, Marcus, I've already started one." Something flickered in his eyes. "I pulled the platform revision history this week," she went on, keeping her voice pleasant, conversational, letting him twist. "Fascinating reading. Turns out this crash structure was thinned 4 years ago, along with a deleted fuel cutoff, along with narrowed thermal channels, the ones that cooked Marco's seals this week as it happens. All the same kind of change. All safety systems quietly removed one at a time over the years, all to make the car faster." She tilted her head. "And every one of them signed off by the same person." The room had gone very quiet. "Who?" Boone asked. And Evelyn opened her mouth to say the name right there in front of the cameras and the witnesses and the safety officer, to end 6 years of a lie in one clean sentence. And Marcus Webb said, "Ethan Carter." The name landed like a dropped wrench. The original chief engineer. Webb continued smoothly, turning to the room, taking control of it the way he'd taken control of everything for 6 years. Brilliant man, troubled. He designed the platform, and then frankly he came apart. Personal problems, we don't need to air them. He made a series of increasingly reckless decisions before he left the company. These changes have his fingerprints all over them. It's tragic, but it's not surprising. We've been quietly cleaning up his mistakes for years. He shook his head, the very picture of sorrow. I'd hoped to spare his name out of respect for what he once was. But if we're being transparent, Evelyn, then the industry should know this dangerous car is the last poisoned legacy of a man who never should have been trusted with a company's future. And there it was. The move Ethan had predicted 3 days ago, standing on a sidewalk. He could make me the villain of my own life. And who's going to believe the janitor? Evelyn looked at Marcus Webb, and she understood that this was the moment. Right here. Everything came down to the next 60 seconds. Because Webb had just done it publicly on camera in front of the sanctioning body. He had pinned 6 years of sabotage on a dead man's reputation, on a man he was certain couldn't defend himself, on a man he'd erased so thoroughly that there was no one left to say otherwise. He'd played the only card that had ever worked for him. He'd blamed the Invisible Man. "That's a compelling story, Marcus," Evelyn said. "There's just one problem with it." She took out her phone, and she made a call, on speaker. It rang once. "Evelyn," said Ethan Carter's voice, filling the room. Marcus Webb went white. "Ethan," Evelyn said, watching Webb's face the way Ethan had taught her to. "I've got you on speaker. There's a room full of people here, the Ridgeline team, a safety officer, some cameras. And Marcus Webb. Marcus was just telling everyone that you're the one who thinned the crash structure on chassis 7. That you deleted the fuel cutoff, that you gutted the safety systems on the platform before you left the company." A pause. "I thought you might want to respond to that." The silence on the line lasted 3 seconds. It felt like 3 years. "Marcus," Ethan's voice said, quiet and even. "You want to tell them what you told me the night my wife died? About the meeting that couldn't be moved?" Marcus Webb didn't say anything. Here's the thing about those changes he's describing. Ethan went on, and now his voice had steel in it, the voice of a man who'd waited 6 years to speak and was going to be heard. "Every one of them was made after I left the company. You can check the dates. The crash structure was thinned 4 years ago. I've been gone 6. The fuel cutoff was deleted 3 years ago. Check the revision logs against my last day of employment. It's in the founding archive, the one on the private server. Oh, wait." A pause, and Evelyn could hear something almost like grim humor in it. "Somebody's been trying to break into that server all morning, haven't they? Marcus 6 failed password attempts. And I'd bet if we check right now, somebody's tried to wipe it in the last hour. Because that server's the one place the real dates live. The dates that prove every one of these changes was made by someone who was still working here after I was gone, which wasn't me. Was it Marcus?" Boone, the old mechanic, was staring at Webb now. So was the safety officer. So was every person in the room. "Marcus," Evelyn said softly, "did you try to access my father's server this morning?" "This is absurd." Webb's voice had climbed half an octave. "You've got a phone call from a disgruntled former employee, a man who left in disgrace, and you're taking his word over your own head of engineering. He'll say anything. He probably made those changes remotely. He was a janitor here until Tuesday," Evelyn said. "You watched me fire him. In Bay 3. You told me to fire him, remember? You said I had to send a message." She let that sit. "So which is it, Marcus? Is Ethan Carter a disgraced engineer who's been gone 6 years and couldn't possibly know the current state of the platform? Or is he the janitor who found the exact seal failure your entire department missed 3 days ago because he understood this car better than anyone alive?" She stepped toward him. "He can't be both. Pick one. Because either way, the story you just told this room falls apart." Marcus Webb opened his mouth. Nothing came out, and Ethan's voice from the phone filled the silence. "I designed that platform to bring drivers home, Marcus. Every safety system on it I put there on purpose, because I knew someday a car built on it would hit a wall at 200 miles an hour, and I wanted the man inside to walk away. And you took them out, one by one, for a tenth of a second, a lap. You looked at systems built to save lives, and you decided speed was worth more." A pause. "I can live with you erasing my name. I made my peace with that a long time ago. But you put a 23-year-old kid in a car that would have folded up around him on Sunday, and that I will not let you walk away from, not for one more day." The safety officer had started writing on his clipboard. "I'd like to see this server," the officer said quietly. "And these revision logs, today if possible." "They're preserved," Evelyn said. "Off-site. Time-stamped. A complete copy made 3 days ago before anyone started trying to alter or destroy the originals." She looked at Webb. "I moved it this morning. It's the bag I was carrying through the parking lot, Marcus. The one you asked me about. The one I told you was files for a meeting." She smiled, and there was nothing warm in it. It was. This meeting. And that was the moment Marcus Webb understood he had lost. Evelyn saw it happen, saw the same structural collapse she'd seen when the crash structure came into view. Except this time it was total. This time there was nothing left holding him up. 6 years of control of managing the narrative of standing on another man's grave and calling it his own foundation. All of it gave way at once. His face went slack, his shoulders dropped. And for just a moment before the lawyers and the denials and the long, ugly aftermath that everyone in the room knew was coming, Marcus Webb looked exactly like what he was, a man who'd built his entire life on the belief that the person he'd wronged would never come back to say so. And the person had come back, not as an engineer, not as an executive, as a janitor with a flashlight who understood the machine better than anyone and who'd waited patient as stone for the truth to surface on its own. "I think," the safety officer said, "that everyone in this room should stop talking until there are attorneys present." Mr. Webb, I'd strongly advise you not to leave the facility. He looked at Evelyn. Miss Vance, I'll need everything. The server, the off-site copy, the revision logs, the inspection footage. This isn't just an internal matter anymore. Endangering a driver's life through deliberate concealment of a safety defect, that's not a personnel issue. That's potentially criminal. You'll have all of it, Evelyn said. Today. Marcus Webb was escorted to a conference room to wait for the company's attorneys, and as it turned out, for the sanctioning body's investigators who arrived within the hour. He didn't say another word. He didn't look at anyone. He walked past the plaque in the lobby, his name still on it. Ethan still missing, and he didn't so much as glance at it. Evelyn watched him go, and then she picked her phone back up, took it off speaker, and put it to her ear. You still there? I'm here, Ethan said. It's done. Her voice cracked on it. It's over. He's finished. The safety officer's calling it criminal. Ethan, it's over. There was a long silence on the line. And when Ethan spoke again, his voice had changed, the steel gone out of it, something raw underneath. Is the kid okay, Danny Reyes? Is his car off the track? Evelyn closed her eyes. Of course. Of course that was the first thing he asked. Not did we win, not is my name cleared, not did we get him. The driver. Always only the driver. His car's impounded, she said. He's not racing Sunday. None of the compromised chassis are. Every driver's coming home this weekend, Ethan. All 9 of them. Because of you. She heard him exhale, a long shaking breath, 6 years in the making. Then it was worth it, he said quietly. All of it. It was worth it. At 6:30 that evening, Ethan Carter picked his daughter up from Anna's apartment, and Lily ran at him full speed the way she did every day, and he caught her and swung her up and held on maybe a little longer than usual. Daddy, you're squishing me. Sorry, Bug. He set her down. Good day at school. We did fractions, and I got them all right, and Miss Rivera gave me a sticker. It's a dinosaur. She showed him her hand, where a Triceratops sticker was slowly losing its battle with a 7-year-old's skin. Did you find a new job yet? Ethan crouched down to her level. He thought about the day. He thought about a room full of cameras and a man's whole life coming apart, and 9 drivers who were going to wake up Sunday morning and go home Sunday night without ever knowing how close they'd come. He thought about 6 years of silence finally breaking. You know what, Bug, he said. I think I might have fixed something today. Something that was broke for a real long time. Was it a car? He smiled. Sort of. Yeah, sort of a car. Are you gonna get to keep fixing it? And that was the question, wasn't it? Because Evelyn Vance had already asked him at the end of the phone call, asked him to come back. Really come back. Not as a janitor, and not as a ghost, but as himself. And Ethan had told her he needed to think about it. That the deal he'd made 3 years ago still meant something. That being there for this little girl still came before everything, before any title, before any car, before any amount of vindication. I don't know yet, he told Lily honestly. There's a lady who wants me to, but I told her I had to check with my most important boss first. Lily's eyes went wide. You have a boss more important than the lady? The most important boss in the whole world, Ethan said. She's about this tall. She's got a dinosaur sticker on her hand. And the only rule she's got is that I'm home for dinner every single night and I never miss a bedtime. He tapped her nose. So, boss, what do you think, should Daddy take the job? Lily considered it with her whole serious face, the way she considered everything. Only if you're home for dinner, she said. Only if I'm home for dinner, Ethan agreed. I already told her, that's not negotiable. What's negotiable? It means some things you don't give up, Ethan said, standing, taking her small hand in his. No matter what anybody offers you, you remember that one, Bug. Some things you don't give up. And as they walked home in the cold evening, a father and his daughter, the janitor who'd built championship machines, and the little girl who was the only title he'd ever really wanted, neither of them knew that. Across town in a corner office, Evelyn Vance was standing at the lobby plaque, with a maintenance man's tools and a screwdriver taking her father's name down for the first time in 20 years. Not to remove it, but to make room beside it for the name that should have been there all along. She was still standing at the plaque when Ethan walked into the lobby the next morning. He hadn't planned to come. He'd told her he needed to think, and he'd meant it. He'd lain awake half the night turning it over, the deal he'd made 3 years ago, pulling against the thing that had come alive in his chest in that windowless room. But at 7:15, after he'd walked Lily to the bus and watched her wave from the window until the corner swallowed her, he'd found himself driving toward Vortex without quite deciding to. And now here he was standing in the lobby he'd walked through 1,000 times as a nobody, and there was Evelyn Vance on a step stool with a screwdriver in her hand. "You're taking it down," he said. She turned, startled. "Ethan, I didn't... How long have you been standing there?" "Long enough to see you attacking my father-in-law's plaque with a screwdriver." He almost smiled. "That's Richard Vance's name up there. Your father. You sure you want to be the one caught pulling it off the wall? I'm not taking his name down." She climbed off the stool. "I'm making room, next to it." She gestured, and Ethan saw that she'd already loosened the bottom bracket, already measured out a space. "Your name belongs on this wall, Ethan. It should have been here for 6 years. And I'm not going to have somebody in a machine shop engrave it and mail it over and bolt it up when nobody's looking. I wanted to do it myself, with my own hands. Because I'm the one who threw your tools across a garage, and I'm the one who's going to put your name back where it belongs, and I want to remember doing it every time I walk past." Ethan looked at the wall for a long moment. His father-in-law's name. Sarah's father, who'd hired a 26-year-old kid nobody believed in, and written the best mind I ever hired on a schematic. The old man had been gone 4 years now, a heart attack sudden the winter after Ethan disappeared. They'd never spoken again after Sarah died. Ethan had vanished so completely that he hadn't even known Richard was sick until he read the obituary. "He tried to find you," Evelyn said quietly, watching his face. "After Dad died, I went through his papers. There were letters. Drafts of letters, actually. He never sent them, or he sent them and they came back, I don't know, to you, trying to reach you." He wanted to apologize. He blamed himself for the meeting, for pushing the platform so hard, for not seeing how much you were carrying. Her voice caught. He never forgave himself for the night Sarah died either, Ethan. He lost a daughter and a son-in-law in the same year, and he thought it was his fault, and he died thinking you hated him. Ethan stood very still. "I didn't hate him," he said. "God, I never hated Richard. He was the closest thing to a father I ever had. I couldn't be near any of it. The building, the cars, the name. It wasn't him. It was never him." He rubbed his face. "I should have called him. All those years, I should have called. You couldn't. I understand that now. You were surviving." Evelyn held out the screwdriver. "But you can do this. Put your name up there next to his. Let it mean what it was always supposed to mean, 2 men who built something together. Let that be the story, instead of the silence." Ethan looked at the screwdriver in her hand, and then he took it. And on a cold Wednesday morning, with no cameras and no crowd and no ceremony, Ethan Carter climbed a step stool in the lobby of the company he'd built and mounted his own name on the wall beside his father-in-law's. And the two of them, the CEO who'd wronged him and the janitor who'd forgiven her, stood back and looked at it together in the quiet. Ethan Carter, Chief Design Engineer. Right where it should have been all along. "There's something else you should know," Evelyn said, "about Marcus." The investigation had moved faster than anyone expected, because physical evidence has a way of cutting through 6 years of lies in a matter of days. The sanctioning body had impounded all 9 chassis by Thursday. 4 of them, chassis 7, and 3 others showed the same deliberate structural compromises. The revision logs pulled from Evelyn's off-site copy and verified against the timestamps Marcus had tried and failed to destroy told a clean, damning story. Every dangerous change made after Ethan Carter's departure. Everyone authorized by the same login. Everyone hidden inside routine paperwork that flowed through the one desk designed to catch it. "He tried to wipe the server," Evelyn said. "That afternoon. after the parking lot. He got administrative access and he issued a full drive erase command. She paused. It didn't work. Do you want to know why? Why? Because Walt caught him. Evelyn actually laughed a short, disbelieving sound. Walt, our 68-year-old night guard with the bad knee. He'd been keeping an eye on the server room ever since Priya told him someone was trying to break in. When Marcus badged into the server room that afternoon, Walt followed him in and just stood there, asked him if he needed help finding anything. Marcus told him to get out. Walt said, and I quote, "I'll leave when you do, sir." Evelyn shook her head. Marcus couldn't run the wipe with a witness standing right there watching him do it. Walt just stood in that doorway with his arms crossed until Marcus gave up and left. He saved the whole thing without touching a single key. Ethan let out a breath that was half a laugh and half something that ached. Walt. He said you'd understand. Evelyn smiled. He said nobody scrubs a floor the way that man did who wasn't somebody first. Said he figured a man like that was worth standing in a doorway for. And Ethan Carter, who had spent 3 years being invisible, had to look away for a moment, because it turned out he hadn't been invisible after all. Not to everyone. An old man with a bad knee had seen him the whole time. Marcus Webb was charged 8 days later. Reckless endangerment. Fraud. Falsifying safety records across state lines, which pulled in federal authorities, and turned a company scandal into something much larger. He never went to trial. His attorneys arranged a plea the way they always do for men in silk ties, but the plea required him to admit on the record in writing exactly what he'd done. Every change, every deletion, every safety system he'd stripped out for 1/10 of a second a lap. And buried in the statement, in the dry legal language of a man admitting his crimes to avoid a worse fate, was a single sentence that Evelyn read aloud to Ethan over the phone the night it was filed. Her voice unsteady. I reassigned the design credits of Ethan Carter following his departure and removed his name from company records in order to establish myself as the principal architect of the platform. There it was, in his own words. The erasure confessed. He admitted it, Evelyn said. He admitted he erased you, on purpose, to take your work. A pause. Ethan, that sentence is going to be in the public record forever. Anybody who ever wonders who really built the Vortex platform, it's right there. In Marcus Webb's own confession. You didn't just get your name back. You got the truth back, permanently. He can never take it again. Ethan was quiet on the line for a long moment. You know what's strange? He finally said. I thought that sentence would feel like winning. I waited 6 years to hear him admit it, and I thought it'd feel like I don't know. Justice. Fireworks. He exhaled. But it just feels quiet. It just feels like the truth finally getting to sit down after standing up for a real long time. Maybe that's what justice actually feels like, Evelyn said softly. Not fireworks, just the truth getting to rest. He took the job. Not right away, he made her wait a week, and he made her agree to it in writing, the one condition that mattered more than salary or title or ownership of his own design's home by 6. Every night, no exceptions. No emergency important enough to change it. Evelyn signed it without hesitation. The last man who told you a meeting was more important than your family destroyed both your lives, she said. I'm not going to be the second one. So Ethan Carter came back to Vortex Motorsport as chief design engineer. The title restored the ownership of his original platform, legally returned to him in a settlement the company's own lawyers recommended without being asked. He had his old office. He had his name on the wall. He had on his very first day back a line of engineers outside his door. Priya first among them, who didn't want to congratulate him or thank him, but who wanted to ask him things. How the thermal channels worked. Why he'd routed the fuel cutoff the way he had. What he'd been thinking all those years ago when he laid out the crash structure the way he did. And that Ethan discovered was the part that surprised him most. Not the vindication, not the office, the questions. You built all this to keep drivers alive, Priya said, standing at his desk that first afternoon, looking at the original schematics spread out in front of them. Every system. And nobody knew. We've been running on your work for 6 years, and we didn't understand half of why it was built the way it was. We optimized on top of it. We never looked underneath. That's the thing I want to change, Ethan said. Not the cars, the engineers. I don't want a department that follows the platform because it's the platform. I want a department that understands why every line is where it is, so that the next time somebody wants to strip out 4 millimeters of crash structure for a tenth of a second, there's a room full of people who know exactly what those 4 millimeters are for, and not one of them will let it happen. He looked at her. A manual tells you what to do, it doesn't tell you why. And a car built by people who only know what that's a car that'll eventually kill somebody, because the day comes when the manual's wrong and nobody in the room knows enough to catch it. I don't ever want this company to be that room again. So he taught them, every week. He'd pull a car apart on the shop floor, actually pull it apart with his own hands, the way he'd learned to do everything, and he'd walk the engineers through it piece by piece. Not what the part was, but why it was what it was. Protecting what happened to the man in the seat if it failed. He taught them to warm a block with a heat gun and watch for the whisper of a failing seal that no sensor would ever catch. He taught them that the most important tool in the building wasn't the million-dollar diagnostic computer. It was a pair of hands and a mind that refused to stop asking why. And Vortex Motorsport over the next 2 years built the safest cars in the history of the sport. Fast, too faster than they'd ever been, because it turned out that a team that understood its machines could find speed. The shortcut takers never could speed that didn't cost anything. Speed built on knowledge instead of compromise. They won. They won a lot. But the number Ethan cared about, the number he kept taped to the wall of his office, wasn't the win count. It was the number of drivers who walked away from crashes that should have killed them. There were 4 of them over those 2 years. 4 hard hits. 4 cars destroyed 4 men who climbed out of the wreckage and stood up and walked to the ambulance on their own 2 feet, because the safety systems Ethan Carter had built and rebuilt and improved and taught a whole department to understand did exactly what he'd designed them to do 6 years and a lifetime ago. Bring the driver home. One of them was Danny Reyes. It happened late in Ethan's second season, back turn 4. The fast one, a suspension failure that pitched the young driver's car into the wall at 190 miles an hour. The kind of crash that 6 years earlier, on a car with 4 millimeters of crash structure quietly removed, would have been fatal. Ethan watched it from the pit wall. Watch the car come apart. Watch the safety cell hold. Watch the side pod crush exactly the way he'd designed it to crush, absorbing the impact inch by inch, spending itself to save the man inside. And then he watched Danny Reyes climb out of the wreckage and wave to the crowd. Ethan Carter stood on the pit wall and put his hand over his mouth and wept quietly in front of everyone, and not one person who understood what they were looking at said a word about it. Danny found him afterward in the garage. 25 now, no longer a rookie, still alive because of a man he'd never really met. They told me, the kid said. He was still shaking adrenaline and something deeper. Boone told me. About the recall 2 years ago. About the crash structure that got put back. He said if you hadn't caught it, my car back then, the Ridgeline car, he said I'd have died in it. On Sunday. And I never knew. Danny's voice broke. I've been racing 2 years thinking I made it on my own, and the whole time it was you, twice. You saved my life twice, and I never even knew your name. Ethan looked at this young man alive standing in front of him, and he thought about all of it. The janitor's coveralls, the thrown toolbox, the 6 years of silence, the deal he'd made with himself in the worst grief of his life. Never be great again. Just be there. And he understood finally that he'd been wrong about that deal. That greatness and being there had never been opposites. That the greatest thing he'd ever done was refuse to walk past a flaw that would have killed a stranger, and that a man could be both. Could be great and be home for dinner, as long as he never once forgot which one came first. You didn't need to know my name, Ethan told him. That was never the point. The point was that you're standing here. That's the whole point. That's all it ever was. Can I know it now? Danny asked. Your name? Properly. Ethan held out his hand. Ethan Carter, he said. I build the cars that bring you home. Evelyn Vance became a different kind of leader over those 2 years, the kind her father would have recognized. She stopped managing the room and started listening to it. She stopped being afraid of the people who knew more than she did and started hiring them on purpose. She never again mistook a uniform for a measure of a person, and she said so publicly in an interview that went around the industry when a reporter asked her about the biggest lesson of the web scandal. The most important person in any building, she said, is not always the one with the best title. Sometimes it's the one nobody's looking at. I fired the best engineer in the history of this company because he was wearing the wrong shirt. I threw his tools across a floor, and he came back not to make me pay for it, but to save 9 men I'd never met. She paused. I'll spend the rest of my career trying to be worth the second chance he gave me. Because make no mistake, he didn't need us. We needed him. He walked back into the worst place in his life for strangers. That's not something you hire, that's something you honor. She kept the maintenance tag. The little white one signed M.Mech, the one that had started all of it. She had it framed and hung in her office right where she'd see it every morning, a permanent reminder of the day she almost threw away the most important person in the building because he came to her in gray coveralls with the truth in his hands. But the ending that mattered most didn't happen at the track or in a courtroom or in a corner office. It happened at a kitchen table on the wrong side of Charlotte, up 2 flights of stairs that still smelled like other people's dinners, because Ethan Carter had bought a bigger house and then given it up within a month because Lily cried the first night in it. She missed Anna next door. She missed her school. She missed the balcony where her father drank Anna's coffee. And Ethan Carter, who could have lived anywhere now, looked at his daughter's face and moved them right back into the small apartment they'd been in the whole time, because some things you don't give up. He was home by 6 every night. He never missed a single bedtime. Chief design engineer of the most respected racing company in America, and he still made pancakes at 4:40 in the morning and wrote an L in syrup, and Anna still told him he was getting thin, and Walt, who Ethan had personally hired away from the night shift to run security for the whole company at Triple. His old salary still came by on Sundays to watch the races and tell Lily stories about her father that made her roll her eyes. Your daddy, Walt told her once, is the most important man at that whole big company. You know that. Lily considered this with her whole serious face. No, he's not, she said. Walt raised an eyebrow. No. He's the most important man here, she said, and went back to her drawing. And Ethan in the kitchen heard it and had to stop what he was doing for a second, because there it was. The only title he'd ever really wanted. Not chief design engineer. Not the name on the plaque. Not the man who built championship machines, or saved 9 drivers, or brought Marcus Webb's whole empire of lies crashing down. Just the most important man here. Years later, when engineering students came through Vortex on tours, and they came often now because the company had become something of a legend. The place that put a driver's life above a lap time, and won. Anyway, the guides would always stop them at the plaque in the lobby. 2 names side by side. Richard Vance, Ethan Carter. And the students would ask about the second name, the one that had a story attached to it, the one people talked about in low, respectful voices. And whichever guide it was would tell them the same thing more or less. They'd tell them about a man who built the heart of every car in the building and lost everything and disappeared. About how he came back as a janitor, invisible, underestimated, told to his face that he shouldn't touch what he didn't understand. Not for revenge, not for his name, not for any of the things that drive most men. But because somewhere out there was a car with a flaw in it, and a young driver who was going to trust that car with his life, and Ethan Carter would not walk past it. They'd tell them that the people who change the world are almost never the ones everyone is looking at. That the man mopping the floor might be the smartest person in the building. That a title tells you where someone stands in a company and nothing at all about where they stand as a human being. And then the guide would point at the name on the wall and say the thing that had become over the years something like the soul of the whole place. The lesson a young CEO had learned the hardest possible way and spent the rest of her life making sure no one at Vortex Motorsport ever forgot. Never measure a person by the uniform they wear. Measure them by what they'll do when no one's watching for someone they'll never meet with nothing to gain. That is the only measure of a life that has ever mattered, and it is the only one that ever will.